Good evening and welcome to the January 27th Hillsborough Town Board Workshop. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Move to approve as presented.
Thank you, Kathleen.
I'll second whatever motion.
The agenda. Evelyn seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And do we have a motion for accepting of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Evelyn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And moving on to our in-depth topics, we have two this evening. We'll start with an update on the water and sewer system capacity presentation. Maybe a team effort. There are 4 names on the agenda, but I see Matt coming up first.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna get us kicked off, provide a little bit of introduction before I turn it over to Marie. You'll hear from all 4 of us this evening. This was a multidisciplinary approach to defining our issue, sharing with the board and public the status of our system and what we plan going forward. So let's flip over to the introduction slide. So high level, what we're going to talk about tonight. Refresher for you all. The board members may remember some of the previous systems we used to define our water and sewer system capacity. This will be a refresher on how we've evolved our current understanding of system constraints and how we are currently tracking those things. Review some of the areas of town that have existing capacity constraints and connect those back to our future land use plans. And then talk about what are our plans to address the capacity constraints that we know of and make space for the new growth. So Marie's gonna come up next. She's gonna talk about how we define capacity, status of the current system, where the limitations are. Shannon's gonna come up and talk about how those relate to our future land use plans. Bryant will then talk about what our CIP projects look like that provide the capacity needed for continued growth. And some of the other approaches that we may offer up for your consideration on how to approach that. And then I'll come back and talk about how we're sharing this message with the community, with the developers, and kind of the takeaways. And so we've got a lot of information we're gonna share with y'all tonight. We'll have a couple of pauses at different sections for y'all to hit us with some questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marie.
Thank you, Matt. Welcome, Marie.
Good evening, everyone. So I just use the.
Whichever one, the remote also works.
We'll see how this goes. Okay. So just to refresh you all, and some of you may have not been here, but I think most of you were. We had a comprehensive sewer capacity model completed in 2021. And we presented to the board in March and August of 2021 and also November of 2022. That study projected what we thought would be potential projects as well as what we knew we had committed through that time and when those projects might come on time. So what we learned from that report was that we have some constraints in our collection system. You guys hear me through this, all right?
Mhm.
And then just to remind you, you don't need to see the finer details, but the pink blob on the screen is our Elizabeth Brady Basin. And the big blue blob is our river basin, and probably about 75% of our system ends up going through the river basin. That's our historic area. That pumping station, the river pumping station, was built with the wastewater plant in the early 70s. The Elizabeth Brady station is our newer station, and it has also been upgraded a few times since we built it. But the results of the study in general are that the river basin is capacity constrained due to wet weather issues. And we were to monitor the growth in the Elizabeth Brady station as it was newer. Other smaller pumping stations had some projected capacity concerns, but we weren't that focused on them because those were stations that were built just to serve the neighborhood that they serve. And we didn't see a lot of expansion needing to go through them. We are currently doing the same thing as we did with the sewer modeling. We're doing that with the water system. So we are working with a consultant right now. We received some grant funding to do that work. We do not have the results of that yet, but we certainly expect that there will be recommendations coming out of that. We've already identified some placeholders in our CIP anticipating that. And we are also working with a consultant on long-term wastewater treatment plant options. Some of you may be familiar with the former way that we looked at capacity, and you can tell that this has been around a long time with the older graphic right there. This was called the Hillsborough Water Capacity Model. It was used for many, many years, and it was fine to use that in the past as there was plenty of system capacity all around until we are learning of our constraints in our systems today. We've had a lot of growth come on board. So we're taking a deeper dive into our planning. The spreadsheet used design values, and it also was very conservative in the way that it anticipated drought conditions. And, but it's still a guess as to when projects will come online. We already know through the developments that have come in, they start, they stop, they start again, they get delayed, and so on. So this capacity model was our planning and utilities best guess at when projects would come online, what they would look like. And so using this now, it is one tool in our toolbox, but it is not the be all end all for determining whether we can handle a project. Just to give you some stats on where we're standing now, again, this is just a snapshot. You don't really need to see the numbers, but we keep a capacity spreadsheet that when the reservoir is a certain level and we know what our average water demand is, plus our required reservoir releases, we can do a calculation that tells us an estimate of how many remaining days of supply that we have in the reservoir. And this snapshot in the red box there shows that when the reservoir is full, our new phase 2 level, which we're probably about 3/4 of a foot down from it, but when it is full, without taking evapotranspiration into account, we have approximately 650 days of water supply. With taking an estimate of 20% evaporation from the water surface, we have over 500 days when the reservoir is full. Now, we also have our long-term Jordan Lake allocation of approximately 1 million gallons a day. And we can negotiate with likely the city of Durham because they can wheel water to us right now. So we do have that option on the table. That is going to be available to us if it's not already in the next 1 to 2 years. Did you want me to pause for questions now or hold them, or how do we want to?
I'll just go.
Okay.
Okay, good, it works. So can you remind me, from the Jordan Lake allocation, 1 million gallons a day, how much does that, like, we were in an emergency in terms of our daily usage, what percentage of daily usage would that be?
So our average right now is approximately 1.6 to 1.8 million gallons a day. So we could,
So the Jordan Lake,
We
based
could
on current
supplement.
usage, would be all maybe more than 50%.
yes.
Okay. And is there a cutoff to that allocation, like that 1 million gallons a day? Anytime we need it, or is it for a set duration, or?
Well, right now we only have mutual aid agreements for emergencies. What we would like to do is study a more long-term routine purchase of this allocation. Right now, if we were to get water from Durham, they would just bill us for the water per our mutual aid contract. And that's just for emergencies. What we want is something more routine, and we would, negotiate the cost of that and how that will work together with the quality of their water, bringing it into ours to make sure that everything jives and we're not upsetting anything.
Okay, great, thank you.
Real quick,
Yeah.
Maurice, when you say Jordan Lake, allocation, that's different than the city of Durham?
Yeah, so through the state, a lot of people pull water from Jordan Lake.
Yep.
And we, along with Orange County, actually, which I didn't even mention up there, applied to the state to get a piece of that water. And the way that we can get the water to us is through the city of Durham, because they already have piping from Jordan Lake, and it's just a matter, and we have the interconnection. So it's just a matter through Cary. So there's a lot of interconnections of water systems in the region, so we would just be tapping into that for a more routine situation than emergencies. Now, Orange County has, I believe, 1.5 MGD allocation, and I believe their original intent, I obviously don't want to speak for them, was to be able to help support the growth in Orange County that would be tapped to our system.
How at risk is that, given the growth projected with Chatham Park, Pittsburgh? And I mean, I know that Pittsburgh and Sanford have their agreement for shared water systems, but sorry. Do you need me to repeat all of that, or? But there's probably gonna be a draw onto Jordan Lake, and how at risk is that?
It's solidified through the state.
Well, no, that's the agreement, but given the draw on the water and as impaired as that lake is and at risk, my question is, I don't have a lot of faith in the water. You can have agreements,
Being there.
but when if there's no water there or it's impaired, it's meaningless. And so that's what I'm really getting at
Mhm.
is, even though Pittsburgh and Sanford do have their water agreement, and that's coming from different water source, not Jordan Lake, all of the projected growth along the corridor, and meaning the corridor the Greensboro Joco corridor, so much of that is drawing on Jordan Lake water through Cary, through the other municipalities. How at risk is this realistically, not on paper, but actual water supply?
The Triangle Water Partnership is doing modeling, and all of us are managing that. So I have not heard of any risk. I don't know if you want to add to
I
that,
actually worked on
because
the
I
project
haven't.
when I was at Durham before I came through, so we're like a 1% slice of the Jordan Lake.
Right.
And as like you mentioned, Chatham County and Sanford have actually withdrawn what's called the Western Intake Partners, or the WIP.
Yep.
So they've withdrawn from that, but the plant that Durham is building is still the same size. So just for reference, we have, before Durham would have to turn us away, they would have had to use all of Chatham County and Sanford's allocation, plus all of their own allocation, before they ever even worry about taking away our allocation.
But in terms of Jordan, what I'm really getting at, it's the actual physical water, not the agreements, but the water, because we've had periods where Jordan Lake has dropped tremendously.
Kathleen, if I can interject, and
Yes.
it sounds like maybe they need to research that and get back to us.
And that's fine. I wanted to make sure that they understood what I was actually asking.
We can do
I do have one quick follow-up also, because I skipped ahead on the slides a little bit. And I don't see it addressed. The elephant in the room, I think, is Lake Orange in some ways, in terms of the water supply. And I'm curious because I see the Lake Orange supplement column there, but I'm curious. I think Lake Orange is owned by the county,
Yes.
and so how does that factor into any additional availability? Is there a set number of gallons that can be drawn in a day from that? Who makes that determination? What's the process with the county if we ever needed it for some reason?
Well, we use it now.
Okay,
We have the capacity, the voluntary capacity use management plan that is in conjunction with the state and Resco Products and the county and us. And we have all agreed, and it's been in place for many decades, that they're gonna contribute this month, we're gonna contribute this much. Under certain drought conditions, we need to release more, we have to keep a minimum flow in the Eno River. So we coordinate all the time with the county on what are you releasing? We even have access to their SCADA, so we can see what they're releasing, and then we match it. So we're constantly
Yeah.
working together, but now that phase two, and I didn't put it in there because that's just a bonus.
Yeah.
Their addition.
so when you say we match it, we're matching it from West Fork.
Yes.
Okay.
So they release from Lake Orange and we release from the West Fork. And then we coordinate, like when it gets down, when we have our stage one withdrawal limitations. We're always communicating back and forth because we have all agreed that we're gonna keep a minimum of 3 CFS cubic feet per second flowing in the Eno at the gauge behind the courthouse. So they're sort of the manager. And if they don't think we're releasing enough, they'll call Nathan and ask if he can open the gates a little bit more. That we had to do that a few years ago while they were under construction fixing their dam. So we're always coordinating. And with our phase two expansion, Lake Orange is sort of dwarfed
Okay,
compared to what we have.
I was just curious,
Yeah, that's a
particularly
good
just,
question.
you know, when folks out there that I know, and I think some of y'all might know them too, or have friends that live out there. But when they had to drop the levels, of course,
Yes.
people were very upset, and so I was just kind of curious, you know, if there was some sort of doomsday scenario where more usage was needed, you know, how that works and that sort of thing, so that's good info to know, so thank you.
Yes, and we actually have an annual meeting with the state water supply group. We send them weekly reports on what we've withdrawn. And so does Orange County and also Resco products. So far, it's all been voluntary and we're all working swimmingly together, and the state has not wanted to come back and say, we're gonna make this a regulation, because we've all managed it so well. Just some stats, recent stats. What you're seeing here is a comparison of 2019 average flows in the bar that are blue to the 2024 average day flow. You've got your red line up top, which is the water plant's rated capacity. And then the dashed lines are also comparing 2019 and 2024 maximum flows. And I just called out because I was like, oh, we went over our rated capacity, what happened there? And we were actually giving mutual aid to Owassa in 2019 during a few days over that month. So basically, this is just demonstrating, yes, we're definitely using more water in 2024 than we did in 2019.
So if we have the 3 million for rated capacity, but we went over that, I assume there's rated capacity and there's like the actual capacity, or is that, like, I'm trying to figure out how did we go over?
Because we were pumping more to
Oh.
Owassa, helping them when they had one of their tanks down for service. So we were just pumping extra during that time.
But did y'all notice it when it happened that we were over the rated capacity? Like,
Yes, so the state's looking more at average daily flow unless we start getting up over that line multiple days in a row, then they're gonna start asking us questions.
Okay,
You could also go over that because we got about 2 million gallons in storage, probably not quite that much. So if you're at peak, you can be.
okay.
Good point. Now, the wastewater plant, this is the same type of comparison. The blue is the 2019 numbers. The bars are the average flows and the dash lines are the max flows. And again, you've got your 3 million gallon a day maximum hydraulic capacity. Now that is rainfall. That is our older leaky sewer system. And I went back and compared the times where we had more flow in 2019 than 2024, and that was due to heavy rainfall during those months in 2019. So future wastewater flow projections, what you're seeing here is the solid blue line is a trend line, and the pinky purple line is the actual measured flows. And then we projected the trend line out a ways. And we also put what we're calling a cone of uncertainty, because as you know, as I said before, developments start and stop. They might want to rezone to higher density. This sort of based on what we know now, always subject to change. And then I just put a snapshot of the table from the collection system report that showed we were projecting about 2.4 MGD in the 2024, just as a comparison. But hydraulic flows aren't everything. We have more of a concern about our nutrient limitations at our wastewater plant. You've all heard of the Falls Lake rules, and we are under a limit in pounds that we can discharge for nitrogen and phosphorus that we can put back into the Eno annually. There's no concentration permit limit, but we measure them in milligrams a liter and then we can convert them to pounds. So the nitrogen is of the most concern. Our customer base is residential in nature, and nitrogen and phosphorus are contributed through our waste streams. And nitrogen has started to increase the past 2 years, actually. We've added several residential homes to the system. We opened a brewery. We have some food processing in town with the PFAP and the Weaver Street kitchens. And we have some restaurants in our business district, and all of those are increasing our nitrogen and phosphorus loads. We're limited to 10,422 pounds a year, and we've used 68% in 2024. So when we look at future nutrient projections, at the current allocation we are given in our permit, we could reach our discharge limit in 5 to 7 years. That is assuming our plant can keep up with the excellent nutrient removal that Jeff Mahagan has been and his team have been working on at the plant. If we lose that ability to keep those nutrient limits down because we just can't keep up with what we've been doing, then that's going to go faster. And to overcome those discharge limits, we have to go from already what we're discharging now to something very, very tiny, which would require an advanced treatment plant process like reverse osmosis, which is millions of dollars, and some other alternative solution, which we are sort of evaluating right now with a consultant. Is there anything we can do right now, a simple process upgrade, or an alternative solution so that we can handle more nutrient discharge. Aside to that too, we're working with the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, as Commissioner Darab knows, on proposed revisions to the Falls Lake rules. And as we get further into that, probably by the end of this fiscal year, we're gonna have Jeff Mahagan and Terry come in and tell you what they're trying to push for, which would allow our nutrient limitations to be increased and possibly get us out to 10 to 12 years.
Marie, can you correct me on this? It hasn't, it's a point that maybe everybody on the board has heard, but I haven't heard it mentioned in quite a few years. Like, there's quite a few years we had where the Hillsborough wastewater treatment plant was the most efficient in the United States. There's like 8,000 wastewater treatment plants as far as removing nitrogen. Jeff Mahagan may say, oh yeah, there's a few days we weren't, or there's a plant in Virginia that was better than ours. But out of 8,000 to be even in the top, so that's how efficient the plant is. So that's a rather remarkable statistic. So just to add some context to what Marie was saying.
Absolutely. He's done a tremendous job tweaking things and making them run very smoothly.
On top of that extreme efficiency that we have, you're projecting that in 5 to 7 years that we may hit that nutrient limit. Is that with all the projected growth of the units, residential units that we have already approved?
That is in the cone of uncertainty. Yes, essentially, yes. So what we have is a projection of if our nitrogen goes up and our flows go up, what pounds does that equate to, and when do we think we'll hit that? So yes, it's considered. Jeff's working on a more detailed table about that, but there's many factors that are going to go into determining if we can hold the line with our efficiencies or what we can do to mitigate it.
Thank you.
More to come on that. So not only do we need to be good stewards and track our capacity so we don't go over, we are being watched by all facets of our regulatory agency, which is DEQ. We send weekly water withdrawal reports to the supply team at DEQ. We submit monthly operating reports. That's MOR. I should have spelled that out. Apologies. For our water plants, so they get to see exactly what our min, our max, our average, all our chemical reads, everything. We send monthly daily monitoring reports for our wastewater plant to the wastewater people, the MPDS people at the state monthly, and they're looking at it, and they're looking at the 80/90 rule, which you've heard of, which there has been some recent regulation to loosen that a little bit for growing communities. However, they're watching. Whenever we do a water and sewer extension permit application, we have to calculate and tell them the committed flow that's we're already seeing, the committed flow that's in the pipeline but not yet connected, the flow from the project that's going to do the extension, and then we have to show them the percentage of capacity that we've used, and then we also have to track if it goes through a pumping station. We have to do the same calculation. What can the pumping station do? What's it already doing? What are you adding to it, and how much is left on that capacity? So we typically are filling those forms out for River pumping station and Elizabeth Brady pumping station. And for the water side, when there's a public water extension, we're telling them how much storage we have in our system, what's the number of our connections, what's our maximum day demand. So they're watching all of this, and that leads us to sort of the meat on capacity right now. I'm calling it the capacity circle. It's not one static number. I just can't give you a number that we would be comfortable with. And I want to explain why, and it's sort of in this circle right there. I'm not gonna go through all of it. But basically, when we look at whether we can handle a project, we look at multiple physical and regulatory considerations. And there's 5 key areas that we look at that are shown in the black bold letters, words across that. So water supply, where it starts, through the water plant, how's it gonna get there? Where's the project at? Do we have 2-inch lines? Do we have larger lines with fire protection? Do we have known pressure or volume issues in that area? What pressure zone is it in? We have 3 pressure zones in our system. And then how's it gonna get back to our wastewater plant through the collection system? Which pumping station has capacity limitations? Which interceptor? We know everything goes to our river pumping station in certain parts of town, most of town. And we also know that those interceptors, being from the early 70s, are overloaded when, they're inundated from the river when we had Tropical Storm Debbie, when we have other intense rainfall. We know that station's overloaded, so can we handle that? And then the plan, of course, we just talked about the nutrient limitations. The items in red there are regulatory limitations. Those are hard stops that once we reach those, we either need to say stop, no more, or find money to make upgrades. So this is when we get a project in and you see utilities comments, we're looking at all of this. We're not looking at, oh, the wastewater plant's only at 50% capacity or whatever else. We're looking at all of it, and that's why we don't want to give you a solid number that says, oh, we have 1.5 MGD left to dole out. It just really depends what the project is, where it is, and how it gets to and from our plants. Now, there's other things we look at too, and that you all consider. And these are some of the non-capacity related things that when staff looks at projects and makes recommendations to you when they're presented, are we considering all these things? And we want to let you know if there's a problem, if it's not in accordance with the adopted land use plan, or is there, is it going to cause us to go in debt and miss our financial benchmarks? Do we already have things down the pipeline that maybe we've forgotten about because they start and stop and start and stop? So, and can we handle doing a capital project right away? All of that. So the capacity takeaway is our concerns in order of priority is not the water supply. That's down at the bottom. We feel we have plenty of water supply. We're concerned about the collection system and how it conveys wastewater to the plant. We're concerned about the distribution system. Can we provide enough volume? Can we provide fire protection for what wants to be developed in town and where? Of course, the nutrient wastewater limits are a bigger concern than the treatment plant hydraulic limits. The water treatment process limits are our next concern. And last is the water supply, because we feel we can tap into outside sources on that. And of course, we just finished the phase 2 upgrade. So with that, that is the capacity takeaway. Hopefully explains a little bit more on how complex the issue is, but Shannon's going to talk about how this all ties in with her her job.
Before Shannon gets off, do y'all have any questions about
Yes,
how
yeah.
capacity is defined and the various factors that Marie and her team are looking at?
Not a question, but shout out to the graphic on capacity considerations. That's a great
I
way
had fun
to
with Canva on that.
summarize a lot of information in moving parts and excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, we've been talking about capacity, particularly in the sewer system for a while, and that was reflected in the comprehensive sustainability plan and how we mapped out these potential growth areas and where we saw growth kind of coming based on the available, land masses that we had that were undeveloped or available for redevelopment. The CSP made some recommendations. A big one is to reduce the urban service boundary to kind of suck in that area of where we will and won't serve future projects. We outlined future growth areas along the 70 corridor, which we pulled in from the 70 small area plan that was done years ago that wanted to see some commercial redevelopment along that corridor. And then we also mapped out, the redevelopment of the South Churton corridor at the Dana Boone area. And then the development and redevelopment down kind of around the Waterstone area. We have plans to align the future land use map with this potential future growth area map. And then we are going to adjust the UDO during the rewrite to allow for more flexibility and with regard to new developments and infill, trying to increase density in the town's urban core for infill duplexes, quadruplexes, and things that we just currently don't have. This growth is going to put kind of more of a strain on our water and sewer, the sewer system in particular. So we are mindful of that and working with utilities. We are also mindful of the development that has been approved thus far, but we haven't seen come out of the ground. These are entitled projects. Some of them may or may not move forward, but we always have to kind of treat them as if they all will, just in case. So, and there is differences in development approval versus capacity. Some of these may be at various points in the process. Some of them have site plan approval or working through construction drawings, but the capacity allocation is not done until a water and sewer extension agreement is signed with utilities, and that kind of puts a clock on how long they have to go ahead and develop.
Is Persimmon Place, or sorry, I thought I said place, not phase. Is Persimmon the one also near Waterstone?
Yes, that's on Kate's. Their entrance is on Kate's.
Cause I saw a sign out there. This past weekend, and I think I don't know if they're using a different name, but it said Kate's Creek Manor or Kate Manor or something. So
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know if that's the name they told.
That's not Persimmon, that's on the north side of Kate's Creek.
Mm-hmm,
I didn't know what it was.
yeah.
Maybe marketing for a future project. The developments changed names a lot. So Persimmon wasn't Persimmon when it first came through. It was just Kate's Creek Development, like unnamed development. But yeah, that one's like on the south side at 86 and Kate's Creek, closer to that area. So if we continue to issue development approvals without building capacity, we may overwhelm our sewer system. So planning is always working with utilities, kind of communicating on even just the inquiries that come through. So you'll see in blue, we have worked with utilities. They have an inquiry system where somebody, even if they just want to know like, hey, I'm planning on building a single family house in this location. Where's the closest water and sewer? Is there water and sewer? And so we can kind of look at those. Planning and utilities can both react to those requests as they come in. We do have areas that we either already have entitlement or master plan approvals or have zoning that we think will probably grow and develop. Those are listed out, but you're all fairly familiar with those projects. And so we've been working with utilities and anticipating kind of those growth projects, and utilities has developed this CIP project timeline to kind of make sure that while we're having the developments come in and get approvals, and we know that those are going to come online, that we're also making system improvements. And so I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk more about the CIP.
So this is, these are CIP projects, this is a list of them here, both water and sewer, that are projects that will address capacity, so will help, either generate capacity or relieve some of the, inflow and infiltration that, Marie mentioned in her part of the presentation. The first 6 there are sewer, projects, and the last 2 are water projects. Here, so it's a little bit zoomed out here, so hopefully you're able to look at this in your slides. This is a map of our, obviously of our town with our sewer and water projects overlaid on top. What you see in here is the fiscal year of each of the current scheduled fiscal year of each of the CIP projects, along with our current cost that we have in the CIP program. Just to give you a visual representation of where they are. Let's see if I can get the, map here. It's not this line map. On my screen.
While Bryant's pulling that up, we'll just call your attention as you're looking at your slides to a couple of the areas. The light blue color that you can see, or the medium blue, those are the areas identified in the CSP as potential future growth areas. And so those are the areas where our land use plans say we want to focus growth. And so what we're showing here is the connection between the location of those and the planned projects that are adding capacity to the system to provide growth opportunities in those areas. And I'll call your attention back to Shannon's slides on the last one she showed, which were the inquiries we're receiving. You'll note that many of those inquiries are not in our future growth areas. And so we have a bit of a mismatch between where available land is, or where people are coming in and asking for capacity versus where we're planning to deliver the capacity. I just want to note those few things while working on the maps here.
There you go.
Showing. All right, so zoom in here just to try to pull the, try to get you a better view here, because it does compress a lot, because we have a lot of projects spread over a wide area. So this link should work for, folks that don't have a current login in ArcGIS. So, if you do want to go home and kind of drive around the map, here. What we have, this is the Eno River East outfall. It gives you a bit of a summary. This is what's in the current CIP project manager here. And this is an estimated cost and an estimated schedule. So maybe you want to, click through this kind of at your leisure, but I'm just going to kind of talk through it now. This is the Eno outfall east. And then this right here, this is the Exchange Club outfall. Both of these projects are actually bundled together into a request for qualifications that we're hoping to advertise this week. So this, the first phase will be underway. You also have the river pump station, that's what we were awarded the federal funding for. So that is currently in design. We just had a 50% design workshop on that. And then this is our actual wastewater treatment plant up here. We have multiple projects there, but we don't have any capacity associated ones yet on that. This here is the Cates Creek outfall and the Elizabeth Brady pump stations. There's Elizabeth Brady Road. The Elizabeth Brady pump station is next on our schedule to get advertised. We're just trying to kind of control the flow of CIP projects that we're advertising. One, to just manage our resources internally, being able to actually administer them, but also two, not to have a whole bunch of proposals on the street at once. So that's our next project that we're going to advertise. That'll be a force main replacement into the wastewater plant, as well as a replacement of the station. And this is the Cates Creek outfall. This is scheduled further out. I think we pushed it to, we're saying complete by 2032. So this is pushed out a little bit further. Idea there being is, can we get the Elizabeth Brady pump station upgraded? So, and then we have some other projects sort of scattered around town, but those are our more near term. Back to.
Before you jump back, I'll just note for you all, on this map, we're back to orange being the future growth areas.
All right, so this says I'm just sort of showing across town with labels, but like I said, if you want to have some time to look at that map and kind of pan around and see where we have projects. Like this now. And then here, this is the projects listed in the actual order we're planning on starting them and finishing them. So the far left side, that's when we plan on either advertising or beginning the project. You'll see River Pump Station has only got 3 years in it. That's because that project's actively underway. So, we're, like I said, we're at 50% design. Our estimated completion is sometime in fiscal year 28. But you can see there's a number of projects that we're hoping to start next fiscal year. And then we have Exchange Club interceptors. We're also hoping to have the Hassel tank replacement out this year, as well as the Eaton River Interceptor and Exchange Club. So we have a lot of projects right now that we're actively working on and more scheduled in the future. I think I'll turn it back over to Matt here. Back over to Marie, sorry. And Liz.
I'm back. I won't be going over all of this, but this is just to say that we haven't been sitting around doing nothing. After we learned of the constraints in the collection system report, these are some of the things that we have done to try to expedite, open up capacity. We're working on multiple fronts to try to get things expanded so that we can safely accommodate growth as well as take care of what we already have that's very, very old. And this is just a list of them, so I won't go over all of them, but we continue to work on applying for funding to help us. I will say developers have offered to help us. We've been working on with them when they want to bring a project in, how can you help expedite the projects? But this is what we've done so far. I think there's a project that's not on there. Lawndale. So we know Lawndale area, just right north of here, is one of our leakiest sewer basins, and we have funding for, oh yeah, it's the last one there. I did add it. So we're actively awaiting state comments to be able to go to bid on that this year and get that done. And we'll be doing pre and post flow monitoring to see how effective our rehabilitation program was. And given that it is our leakiest sewer basin, that we hope that it will be able to free up more capacity in the river basin to support some of the inquiries we've been receiving. So I'm doing too. Yep, I'm doing this one too. So what else can we do? Well, one idea is that we can reevaluate our system development fee strategy. As you know, the legislature dictates that at least once every 5 years, we look at our system development fees. We have to hire a consultant. They look at all our numbers and they propose, and then we public notice the recommendations for system development fees. And that's for new growth. We just did this exercise a few years ago, and there's 3 different ways you can calculate system development fees. One is sort of looking back on what you've already spent on the system and try to recoup that cost. You could also look at your CIP and look forward and develop your system development fees based on those costs, or you can do a hybrid of both. A few years ago, we elected to look backwards and try to recoup the money that we had already spent on system improvements, but we could go back and look at system development fees again and decide to do a hybrid or a forward-looking approach if we are confident that the forward-looking CIP projects will actually be constructed, because we don't want to get into estimating developer connection fees and then make them artificially high if a project doesn't go through. So we need to be confident that our CIP is going to be solid and we are going to move forward. That's one thing. We also are working to look at capacity right up front. Oftentimes, and especially since we serve out of town, we're not always hearing of projects that might be out of town that are slated to connect to our system. We're trying to catch capacity allocations up front and also merge them with planning. So we want to better align our water and sewer extension contract stipulations with also land use entitlement deadlines. So we're working with planning On that, I already talked about the Jordan Lake allocation that we could look at getting on a more routine basis. Other ideas that have pros and cons are basically putting it out there to developers that, yeah, we might be able to approve your project, but you can't get a meter set until the project is complete. Pros are on that, or that we can approve projects that we want. Cons are that right now, the way that we structure the water and sewer extensions is that they have to start construction within a certain time frame and connect within a certain time frame. We could potentially tie up capacity for multiple years. As you saw Bryant's chart, a lot of these big projects are gonna take multiple years to complete. So pros and cons, but that is something you could look at. And then, of course, mention the Falls Lake rules revisions. So part of the study that the Upper Neuse River Basin Association just completed essentially showed that municipal dischargers upstream of Falls Lake are a very small percentage of the problems experienced in Falls Lake, that it's mostly natural wooded areas and agricultural uses that are contributing the most nutrients that are threatening or impairing Falls Lake. So our approach, which again, you will hear about in more detail from Terry and Jeff later this year, are to try to change the way that we're allocated those pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus so that we can get more and also not be required to do those intensive and expensive upgrades to our wastewater plant to treat some of these nutrients. So that is proceeding. There's work groups going on. Terry and Jeff are involved in those, but we're hoping we can get some more allocation out of it and avoid some costly upgrades. And by the way, we're still paying on the 2012 wastewater treatment plant upgrades through FY34. So we're still paying that debt service. So would hate to turn around and do a reverse osmosis project and assume all that again.
So, got a lot of information at you, so I have two wrap-up slides. So this is the message that we want to share with the development community. This is the big takeaway and how we're sharing this information with folks who come in and want to do business. We have limited capacity right now for projects that use a large amount of water or sewer at this time. We are continuing to push forward with residential infill, so small, onesie twosie type developments can still be accommodated. Utilities will meet up front with folks at the very beginning to evaluate capacity using all those factors that we've shared tonight. But capacity is not guaranteed or reserved currently until the water and sewer extension contract is signed. And so that's way down the line at construction drawings. So that's one of the options Marie is talking about studying is, do we need to move that back and commit the capacity early? And so we know it's off the books and we have more certainty about when projects are moving forward. Last one, cost sharing of improvements is a way to move this forward. You all are familiar with some of the developers that have brought forward proposals to cost share recently. I'll say, internally and with our consultants, we're pushing the financial model about as hard as we can in terms of rates to customers, debt service coverage and things like that. And so at a certain point, we are, no pun intended, tapped out. And if you want a project to move forward ahead of our schedule, you need to bring money with you. And so those are the messages that we're trying to get out and share with folks. And just, key takeaways we want to share. I've kind of gone through the first one. The big pinch points the next 3 to 5 years. That's when, if you go look at Bryant's schedule of those projects, if we can deliver those projects, that will increase the capacity on both the water and sewer side to handle not just the currently approved growth, but what we anticipate in those future growth areas. Maria shared with you how we define capacity. It's not a static number. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And so staff spends a lot of time working with developers to understand their project and understand, how we can squeeze capacity for it. So we have a capital improvement plan, we have a funding model that is addressing this problem. We're continuing to search for funding, using other people's money as much as we can. But the last thing is, we don't want to lose sight of, we can't put all our resources into new capacity. We still have to take care of the core system. You all have set the priority of taking care of what we have. We have an aging system, and so that requires a certain percentage of our financial resources to maintain for our existing customers. With that, we'll sit back and let you all have some discussion if you have questions. This is mostly like the idea for tonight was share information, get everybody on the same page with their understanding of where we're at in the system and how we're sharing with the public and the customers that come in. Hey, here's our issue for right now. We're working on it. We're gonna get through it. And then, you know, we remain open for business.
Thank you, Matt. Let me just say a few words and then I'd like to go around the table and give everybody a chance to kind of ask their questions or reflect on their observations about the conversation. So thank you, Matt, Marie, Brian, and Shannon. That is a lot of information. It's critical information. And we've had similar updates to this in the past. And one suggestion might be that we have an annual conversation like this in January as our budget season gets underway, to help level set what our capacities are and what the interests are, and just get an update from staff on that. So that's just a suggestion. And also, if we do it in January, that's before our first planning board meeting too. So that helps kind of set the stage for the year. So it sounds like it's becoming more critical, and that over time we'll probably want to keep our eye on that conversation. So my main takeaway from this is that we continue to track and refine our understanding of what our capacities are, where the pinch points are, and what that means for our expenses to maintain this ability, and what that might mean for future growth. And therefore, going forward, we should continue to keep our eyes focused like a laser on development proposals that are in line with the all those bullet points that you gave us about is it in the future land use, is it in keeping with the comprehensive sustainability plan, the strategic plan, all those things. So that as we approve any future capacity, it's aligned with what our goals are. So that has never been more important than now. And a question to staff, and that is, because that is such a lot of information, is there any type of checklist that you could provide to us in the planning board as we receive development requests to remind us of all these constraints, and how does this fit in? You know, is it red, yellow, or green for each development proposal going forward? That might.
As a matter of fact, there is. Marie has developed a one pager that we're workshopping. Thought it was too much information for tonight to go through. And so at a future workshop, we plan to bring that back of, hey, here's what we're doing in terms of information to the planning board and you all, that will go through red light, green light on some of those factors. So we do have something. Marie's put a lot of work into it, and we'll be bringing it to you all in draft form.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I guess we'll start over here, Megan. Observations, questions,
Well,
clarifications?
first off, I appreciate all the time and effort that went into this. There was a lot of information, and it was presented well and understandable, and thank you all for putting your input into it. I think as Mayor Bell mentioned, that this is a good reminder for going into the budget season, just to remember. So when we look at all the projects that are coming at us in the budget, what are the consequences, and how is this really going to affect some of our other plans that we have with the future growth of Hillsborough? So yeah, but again, thank you so much for everything.
I will ditto that. Great presentation, lots of information, some things, some new things, but mostly things that we're already aware of. So thank you for putting together such a informational presentation. I don't have any specific questions. You know, my focus is always, but, wants to be on what we have. And so, you know, the importance of, based on, you know, what I've seen and what I've heard, those are priorities that I'm seeing right now too. So, I think it's just so important for us not to get too far ahead of ourselves and take care of, you know, what we have in our existing system now. And what we can, you know, continue to maintain and obviously, for the future of our system.
Thank you, Rob. Kathleen?
I agree. Well done, and I really appreciate the maps. That was extremely helpful. The only question I have right now, and I'll probably have questions later, but, you know, as we're looking at, you know, pulling in our urban, you know, the services boundary, are we gonna be in trouble with the downzoning regulations that we've just been hit with?
Now, look at the road. Might be too soon to say, but we wouldn't necessarily be rezoning property. We might just be shrinking our service area,
And that, I wondered though, if that could be,
construed.
yeah. I mean, now, at least the last conversation, you know, that I had earlier today, it continues that there's still confidence that that will be modified or whatever, but until then,
It's the law.
it's something. I don't have any other questions, like, mostly it's just processing, but the maps, I really want to give a shout out for that. It's very, very helpful.
Thank you, Kathleen. Matt?
I just have one question clarifying on the capacity considerations and how it varies day to day, just based on, you know, what's going on, in the environment, literally and figuratively. So with that many variables, which we're not the only system that has to consider those, I'm sure, what do other systems do and say when people ask them, like, how much capacity do you have? Are they a little bit more likely to give a hard number or kind of give an answer to yours?
Thank you for the opening up. Yeah, so I mean, like, I was a consultant, you know, before I, you know, worked for the city of Durham, so I worked on both sides of the table. And the bigger the system, the less precise an answer you have to give, just because you've got so much bandwidth, you know, to be able to handle a lot of, you know, relatively small projects. And, you know, for a place like Durham, a 300 unit apartment complex is a small project compared to their total customer base. Most of the indexing and dashboarding I've seen, usually it kind of hits one of two major walls. There's fire flow and fire flow availability on the water side. So what can we support and what does our current code require? And so that I've seen it, for example, I did a map for Boone where there was actually a green zone, yellow zone, red zone. This is where they can support flow, and that map shrank. So that's kind of how the answer to the question was, we'll serve anywhere in this area and we'll make our system work to fit this polygon. And then on the sewer side, the biggest capacity issue tends to be pump stations. They really are a pinch point. And, you know, what we did in Durham is we did the letter to industry where you would basically say, look, you can go forward with your rezoning, your site plans, your construction drawings, you can do all that. But you can't get a meter from us until the CIP project, the project the city's doing, is done. And so that's one of the, you know, we had that as one of the bullet points as a strategy going forward. So those tend to be the two sort of pinch points, and there is the sewer capacity thing specifically, they go off of the state's metrics. So we track it against a number. Once you hit a certain number, then you might say, okay, letter to industry.
And then, so I guess, is there, generally speaking, like a range of capacity then? You know, obviously it would change based on all those considerations, and I'm glad you also like to use Canva. It's great, it makes amateurs look professional. But, you know, is there just like a given range and it just moves between that range? And so if
It's the best
if
way.
Mark calls you tomorrow, that might differ from the answer you would give tomorrow might differ from the answer you would have given 2 weeks ago.
The way I'm used to answering that question is, it depends, it depends on how much risk we're willing to assume, how, how significant is the project, how significant are any kind of delays we think we're gonna encounter on the CIP project. It really depends on the level of risk and the level of uncertainty that town's willing to expose itself to.
Okay.
And it's, so it, will we have an SSO tomorrow if we let one more gallon in today? No, but if we let 1 million gallons in today, will we have an SSO tomorrow? Absolutely. So the truth is somewhere between those two extremes. And that's where we always have to kind of balance, CIP projects, operational changes. Marie mentioned that in one of her slides is we did some very, very low budget upgrades to Elizabeth Brady to get more flow out. Like are there some small low hanging fruit that we can pick first to mitigate that risk?
Okay. And remind me what SSO against.
Sanitary sewer overflow.
That's when the EPA gets involved or
If you get
DEQ?
too many of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that's been something that's come up is, we overflow and it's been for a certain amount of time and a certain amount of gallons and that sort of thing. So thank you for giving us the acronym.
Thank you, Matt. Evelyn, do you have any questions or comments?
I thought it was an excellent presentation. I've heard a lot of it. Who can tell me the time that, we were running short of water or something, and maybe it was the amount that was going behind the courthouse? That Piedmont Minerals stopped asking for water and Eflin stopped asking for water. Was anybody here then? Other than me?
I was there.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, are you talking about at one point, because you're alluding to Piedmont Minerals was using like 80,000 gallons a day.
Yeah,
Eflin Sheets.
but they voluntarily stopped and Eflin stopped. What was, do you remember what the problem? We didn't have enough water?
Well, I think it was,
Evidently didn't have enough water going downstream.
Well,
Or they weren't taking water out, so there was more water to go downstream. If Piedmont didn't get water, and Eflin didn't get water, there would be more water left in the, to get to where. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
I can answer. The answer is Commissioner Lloyd is correct, that during times of droughts, we were only able to take so much out of the river at a time. Our relationship with Piedmont Minerals at the time, they would voluntarily cut back on the amount of water they used. I don't remember about what's the system right next to us? It's it's like I don't know that they ever cut back. But they're basically not pulling any water out, so those two things.
I think they weren't taking, I think they decided not to take water from us.
Yeah, they're no longer taking water out of there, so between that and Piedmont
Yeah,
Minerals
so
having
it was
alternative
Piedmont.
ways to treat the water, that's been beneficial for us.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
But that was one thing, and, I can't see if we reach a point that we don't have enough water. Why we want, to keep adding more and more development. And then get water from, let's say, Durham, or it would come from, Jordan Lake to Durham, and then we could get water from Owasso, but why do that if you've got enough to do? Why buy the water, well, the developer would have to buy the water, or we would have to buy the water. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, so we have a pump station right now on
Yeah, I
70.
know we do,
Right
I
at the
know
county
we
line.
do.
So what we would run that station all the time. Right now, Chatham County has a similar arrangement with Durham. They buy water at I don't want to get too inside baseball here, but Durham has 5 tiers of water billing rates. Tier 5 is what you buy at right now. We buy it right now as like an emergency use. Chatham County has an agreement to buy Tier 3. Tier 3's water rates are lower than our water rates. So we can buy water from Durham cheaper than we can charge the customer. So that delta would be a net gain for us minus whatever our maintenance expenses are for that new system. So the short answer is we could do it, I don't want to say profitably, but we could do it without subsidizing the development financially. And it's an easy, it's right there on 70 and it,
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I know that, but I don't know why, we would have to, if we reach a point that we don't really need more development and we're running out of water, why go to the, why use what we have instead of going out and getting more, and then we're gonna need more. And there was another question, there was another thing, before, I think Eric might have been here, when Remus Smith and I were on, this big, well, somehow you might remember it, Mr. Lawyer, the area on old number 10, but they wanted to development, and they wanted to annex along, 70, and go 70, go to Polaris's property, and then go back down old number 10 to the golf. There was a golf club. So there was, Remus Smith and I were on this committee. I was opposed to it. He was for it. Horace Johnson was mayor, and he wanted to annex it. It lasted, the committee might have lasted two years. I don't know. It was lots of fun. We went back and forth. Neighbors hated neighbors. Nobody wanted the golf course. Golf courses are the worst things in the world for water.
they do use a lot of water.
So I just thought I would throw that in and make it more interesting. I just know that you're thrilled to hear that, but you don't know what you missed. Can you imagine annexing along number 78 and going all the way to old number 10, just along the way? And then it would have been, it was so much fun.
It sounds like fun.
And I'm sorry you missed it.
I'm sorry I missed it. We did have the Economic Development District when I was in Durham that was gonna be Durham water extending up 70 into Orange County. It would be served by Durham, annexed by Durham, and that was ultimately.
Was before that, and then I called up, we were gonna buy water from Durham to help give water to this development. So I called Mr. Hughes or whoever was the manager of Durham and asked him, could he prevent Hillsborough from buying water if it was not an emergency? And he said he didn't care. So I remember that quite well. But anyway, you gave a good presentation, but I'm sorry you missed that. It was lots of fun, and I got to know one of the reporters quite well, so.
I'm sorry I missed it too.
I'm truly sorry. That all three of you missed it, all four of you, especially you, Tammy, you would have liked it.
Mark,
Having the golf course.
Sorry.
I have a question to build on of Evelyn.
I guess thank you for your presentation. I thought it was really good, and I learned some things.
Thank you, everyone.
You should like more.
Do you have more?
No. I'll stop.
I think Megan does.
Yeah, I do. Actually, as it was going around, I had looked through here and thought of a different question, but Evelyn was kind of cutting, I think, down that same path. And that was the, Marie, you mentioned renegotiating a contract outside of mutual aid with Durham. And Brian, you just mentioned that lower tier is, explain more how that would help Hillsborough in this development question.
Yeah, so right now, so Chatham County has an agreement to purchase, I believe they're up to 3 million gallons a day from Durham. And the agreement is they always buy 3 million gallons. If they use 2.1, if they use 2.9, if they use 3.0, they're buying 3 million gallons. But they buy it at the lower rate. And the notion there is, when we buy the water, we can buy the water from Durham more cheaply right now than we can produce it when you factor in our production cost. So you can have water only customers, potentially you pay at, that are charged out of town rates because we would not annex without sewer, that we could supply water from Durham with. So that would be like a financial financially, that would be a cash flow positive. The negative being obviously it would have to be on the east side of town, which is a further response time for, city maintenance staff and everything else.
So the cash flow positive would help possibly with CIP projects.
That's right.
So not so much it's a water capacity issue, because I know that's number 6 on the list. It's more of, let's find a way to free up some funds to
Yes.
make these other issues.
It allows development in an area right now that we can't really target because of perhaps really hydraulic and engineering constraints.
Thanks.
Brian, is that just like northeast part or southeast?
It would be really along 70, like where this Councilman Lloyd described, Commissioner Lloyd described the fund. It would be down that direction. It's sort of kind of a refresh of some of the older ideas that they talked about with that pump station. But without a golf course.
Yeah, and there was one more thing. I think I
Yes,
was
sir.
on the board when we voted to buy water from Durham. I think, if not, I'm pretty sure I was. If not, my father was, so one of us was.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other discussion, we'll thank staff for that excellent presentation, and we will move on to item B on the regular agenda, Community Reinvestment Program Review with Jen. Jen, while we're getting that set up, I'll make a suggestion to you and to the board that we, go through the presentation, and then when we get to discussing the decision points that are in the agenda, that we kind of purposefully go around the room so everybody gets a chance to have input on those
Okay.
3 decision points. Might make
Perfect.
the conversation a little bit more to the point.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay. All right, good evening. I have a pretty short presentation to just walk through kind of the the sequence for tonight, revisiting the community reinvestment program that you all discussed at the December meeting with Emily Bradford, our budget director. So coming out of that, I don't think I know how to use this. I'll use the laptop. Do I need to just? Okay, perfect. So you all provided a lot of really helpful feedback in December, which staff was able to go back, listen to it again, catalog everything to try to make sure that we're capturing all of the feedback that you all brought to us that night. And so there were a lot of items. Some of it may hopefully get at the essence of what you all were communicating to us. But definitely feel free when we get down to that section to clarify anything that was included on that board feedback list. There were about 33 items. So given that there was so much,
Could you stand in front of the microphone, Debbie?
Sorry. And let me know if I need to speak up even louder. But given the amount of items that came out of that session, staff is proposing having the next steps be in phases. So for phase 1, which is phase we're in right now, it was essentially incorporating a lot of that feedback that you all provided by making those changes directly on the application that would go to nonprofits as part of the FY26 process, as well as making the updates to the policy document as well for this that you all would adopt. And also clarifying the funding amount, which right now is TBD. I know the board indicated a preference for reserving a percentage of the general fund expenditures. Staff is thinking through the logistics of backing out things like capital and other interfund transfers that would kind of cause irregular spikes. So to trying to make it a little bit more consistent across the years. But we'll come back during the budget process to
have a proposed amount for you all to react to and provide feedback and approve. But just need to kind of keep working through that a little bit more and figuring out. I think one of the things that will be helpful for us is clarifying exactly what kinds of programs are included within the nonprofit, because depending on that answer, that might impact what amount makes sense to include. So we'll come back to the board. So you thinking through that. So just want to, for example, if certain programs are excluded, then that may be, if you're thinking about like the overall pot of money that's included, if there's certain things that are currently being included as part of that kind of amount, then that percentage may need to just go down to reflect that it's now being captured in a different part of the budget as opposed to the nonprofit program or the community reinvestment program. So for phase 2, that's where a lot of the bigger topics are included that you all discussed. So the funding process for the nonprofits, so which nonprofits are captured within which of the different processes that we may have in place. The audit and financial requirements is another one. I know the board indicated a desire to have something that's kind of tiered, that may be based on the organization's budget, maybe based on the amount that they're receiving from the town. The reporting requirements, whether they're in the community reinvestment program or as a budget request, kind of what are those reporting requirements that we would be asking of the nonprofits, the 501 nonprofit designation, and which of the different categories that the town would want to count as being eligible for funding. And then the question about the Orange County joint application. Those are all topics that are gonna just require a little bit more time from staff to do additional research to be able to come back and have a fuller conversation. But we're still missing pieces at this point. But the big constraint is nonprofits really need to get their applications, which they haven't gotten because we haven't finalized it. And they typically get it around January, February timeframe. So we're kind of running up against that constraint of trying to get that application out to them. So wanting to put some of these meatier topics as part of phase 2, which would be in a fall update to the board. And so that we'd be able to then incorporate those things into the next funding cycle of FY27. So then the third phase would be winter 2025 of this year. So at that point, we'd be able to have an evaluation of the how this current cycle goes and really be able to make any modifications based on feedback that we get or feedback that you all have as far as how the process went. And then also develop a rubric or set of guiding questions or framework that the board would use to be able to make future funding decisions. One of the feedback that was provided in December was just really wanting a process that's going to be user-friendly for nonprofit organizations. And so that's something that as we were building out this next iteration, we really wanted to keep in mind. And so in the application, there's a checklist at the very beginning because there's lots of different things that we're asking nonprofits to provide. And so wanted to have a checklist that makes it easy for them to just go down through the list before they submit the application and just be able to clearly identify for themselves and for us that they were sure to include it as part of their application so that they don't have to go back through the policy and dig the different pieces out. The next one is just having a consistent application window. So
we'll work through the logistics of that, but that was one of the feedback that we heard from you all is having a date that nonprofits know they can expect to see that application become open every year. So we're hoping to have that at the start of the calendar year, every year. And one of the things we really liked was I believe Commissioner Dare mentioned that Orange County does that kickoff for their process. And so that seemed like a really great idea so that we can just kind of walk through all the different changes for the upcoming year. If there are any, just walk through the process of how an organization can go about submitting their application. And if they have any questions, we can answer those at that time. So just an opportunity to clarify the process for those, especially the ones that may be newer to the process or haven't gone through it before. So that was a quick summary. Just had the three different points that I wanted for us to hit on tonight. And as Mayor Bell said, we can certainly go through these kind of commissioner by commissioner and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to weigh in on all these different points.
Thank you, Jen. I'll start off by just saying that it started out as like a small topic. That was a 2-hour conversation. And hats off to staff for multiple staff listened through the 2-hour process more than once.
Yeah.
And it shows in the level of detail that you gave back to us. So thank you. And sorry, because that was a lot of work.
No, I was really appreciative that we now have the streams that we can go back to YouTube and watch, because that makes it definitely easier to go back through and listen in on those conversations and get back in that mindset.
Thank you. It's helpful. How about Megan, we start over here and
Yeah,
do you want us to respond to all three, or do you want to start on the first one and go around and then the second one and go around?
Yeah, if we could just go question by question, that would be helpful, I think.
So just,
okay, so the first one, there was I guess maybe a clarification,
Okay.
that I noted in my notes here. And that has to do with a tax exempt letter or other documentation confirming the 501 nonprofit status. And I saw that was crossed off as not being a requirement for this. And I believe my understanding of our discussion that day, and I didn't listen to it multiple times, but was more about like what type of 501, not that we were eliminating the proof that the organization is a 501, no matter what they are. So that was the only one where I kind of, I paused when I see that that's been crossed off as a requirement. So, so that's my only addition, clarification, or modification. The rest of the phases, they looked reasonable to me, and the timelines also. It's the other two. Oh,
Okay, yeah, and that we can do that approach.
so I don't know if
now.
there was other ways that people thought of that 501, if it was an elimination altogether, or if it was just maybe a question of what
Yeah.
type of 501 we were going to fund.
Rob?
I don't have anything real specific that jumps out at me, but why would we remove the 501?
So that, I had gone ahead and removed it because I was, when we had that conversation, I think the thought was like, are there certain designations that wouldn't be considered eligible if it, crosses over into, like political aspects or, I think like ability to, provide funds towards like political efforts.
Advocacy.
Advocacy, yes. And so, I had not had a chance to really dive into all the different kind of designations that there are and what they do, or, so that is definitely an area that I am not familiar with at all. So my thought was just to remove it altogether until we can get to that. But if, if that doesn't exempt an organization, like if we're not getting into the specifics of like what designation they are, and it's just a matter of like, do they have a tax exempt letter or way of justification, then we can certainly include that in. I think I was just like, until we get to that point, let's just kind of keep it out, but I mean, I think that's fair point.
I'm gonna pass my time. I don't have a whole lot of questions.
My only question is about that status,
Okay.
because I think the idea is that some organizations might not have that status, and the way I read it, they couldn't apply for funding. So it'd be helpful to, somebody to send out a cheat sheet later on the different 501(c)(3) subclassifications and their primary functions, and
Mhm,
is there any we would want to exclude?
mhm. But for
I don't
now,
think-
to just
I don't
have
think you
it
should
as
have to
a,
have it to be able to apply for funds.
can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking that if you don't have to have a 501 status to apply for funds. If it's a minor amount of money, it's like over $1,000, and we wouldn't entrust $20,000 to an organization that wasn't. 501(c)(3) of some sort of 501 status, but if it's $1,000, then it's not as important.
Mhm, mhm.
That's my feeling.
So would you like to ask for, and if they don't, it's not that it makes them ineligible, but it might make them ineligible for like a larger sum.
Something like that.
Okay.
The example that I can cite is the Hillsborough Climate Challenge. It's not a
It was
501
what?
anything.
I didn't catch what you said.
The Hillsborough Climate Challenge, last year, we granted that organization, that group of people, $1,000 for marketing purposes. But they're not a 501(c)(3) or anything.
Okay.
That's it.
I actually want to see 501 designation because ad hoc groups come and go. At least 501 shows there is some permanency of a certain level, even though, yes, nonprofits come and go. But at least there's enough commitment to have gone through the process and invest in themselves to be one. So I do want to see 501. But the thing that I have said all along, that I don't see documented is priority for those who have no place to go, are the most vulnerable. And that can be addressed, the vulnerable populations, how will vulnerable populations be served? How many and how, but, we are the last resort for vulnerable people who have no place to go. And, with our limited resources, to me, that's part of taking care of what you have before you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You take care of survival before you get into other things. And my wish list is we can support all. But if we have to choose, my heart's gonna be serving those who have no place to go.
But definitely ask clarification in terms of the application process.
Asking, and that.
Saying, having a question
A
on there.
question about
serving a-
how are you serving, what vulnerable populations are you serving? I'm making up, and I'm sure it can be done elegantly, so it's not a laundry list, but what vulnerable populations they're serving, how are you serving them, how many, is it one person, is it, how are you serving? And I'm sure there's a much more elegant way of it. Let's see.
Yeah, and I do remember you mentioning that, and I'm sorry I didn't capture it on that list. Where I was envisioning that when I had heard you mention it was in that rubric or the guiding questions that would come out as far as like the board designate, like if that was a board priority, then that would be something that would be like reflect a higher priority within the rubric. If an organization, for example, met that outcome or made an effort toward that goal, then they would receive higher priority or higher points of some sort. But something that would be worked out through that rubric or guiding set of framework.
How we go about it, but I do like the idea of having people document. If nothing else, we're not going by memory or hearsay, that we hear from them and that we see they have thought through. I mean, other than that, I'm like, I am impressed with how you've captured.
Thank you.
Cause we do and I mean, I'm not surprised that our conversation was 2 hours. I mean, I was on the board when we had the old process that was forever terminal. I don't expect this to ever not be terminal. I mean, the funding, even though it may be small amounts, but those organizations, it's a big deal. And the need is so much greater than what we have, and I suspect over the next 4 years, it's gonna get one heck of a lot worse. As things get pushed to the states and local. Other than that, I like the overall approach. One thing I wanna I have some concerns with is some of our MOU.
Which,
Our MOU, so we have MOUs, you know, like for the partnership, we have MOU, you know, some of the ones we have MOUs. I would like to see is continue to be budget requests. There's too much planning and infrastructure to be on an annual, maybe it will, maybe it won't. And again, they're dealing with vulnerable populations. Other than that, I don't have any comments right now.
And those were, ones like related to the homelessness or.
Well,
housing
you know, we've got the
rethinking.
MOU with Home Trust, we've got MOU with the partnership. I know we've got other MOUs and I'm just blanking.
Yeah,
Um,
no, that's helpful.
but those MOUs are there so that they are budget
Right.
requests and my desire is that they remain budget requests and not lumped in.
Mhm.
And that way, and that's similar with Chapel Hill Harbor also, so we'd certainly be consistent. But that way we remain true to what we've promised to do, and frankly, it's a way of supporting you know, the helping, again, the most vulnerable, but with a lot of infrastructure that's dependent on it, that it's not just a project, it's, well, it's projects, but not a 1 month or a 3 month or 1 week, but year plus projects, so. But I was impressed with how you pulled this together and, timeline I'm okay with.
Great, and thanks for bringing up the MOUs. I don't think staff was envisioning that any of those that currently have those existing MOUs that the process would change for
I
them.
didn't think so, but I wanted to make
Yeah,
sure that that we addressed that.
Yep, those would stay on outside of this process. So thanks for clarifying that.
I would just echo everyone else on the nonprofit status part. I think it would be fine just to say for now 501c3s. I think the big hiccup potentially were things like athletic associations and like chambers of commerce, because they are not a 501c3, they fall under C6, I think it is. But I think as long as it states 501c3 organization, that's sufficient, or a designated fiscal sponsor. I think would be good, because when we talked through this with the tourism board many moons ago, I don't know if it was feedback from Bob or from the finance department, but I remember us being very strong that no matter the dollar amount, we wanted to make sure it was being received by a 501c3, either the group of people are a 501c3 or they've partnered with one who could receive those funds. And I know some big examples would have been like Nash Dash, which was a one-time event on Nash Street, but it was a derby thing.
Yeah.
And Wolf was the fiscal sponsor for it, and it was just a group of community people. And then River Park Concert They did not have a 501c3. They used Wolf as a fiscal sponsor. And then when that group, no, I take that back. They were originally in the Arts Council, and then they became, the group that organized it became a for-profit entity. But they still wanted seed funding for the River Park because it was free and all that stuff. And was not part of any profit making. And so Wolf was the fiscal sponsor for them as well, so that they could meet the, you know, the criteria. And I think there were a few other situations where instead, I think we had a music festival that a record label was doing. And I think they also had to partner with a nonprofit in town in order to receive those funds. So I think, you know, formal organization or that they've partnered with someone, which I think would speak to your point, which is they've made some sort of investment in working with nonprofits. There's a lot of reasons why people don't want to start a nonprofit. But the thing that comes to mind is if you're not a nonprofit and we're giving you funds, someone's taking on a tax liability if it's not going to an organization. And for someone to receive even $1,000 only to find out that oops, a third of that should have been held back for taxes or something, puts them in an uncomfortable bind. And then the reason we're appropriating the money can't fully be utilized because a third of it, if the person even knows about it, about getting a 1099 and all that stuff, they're not getting the full usage of those funds if they're not doing, you know, some sort of nonprofit partnership.
And they can't also, the donations, they can't get the same donations if they're not a 501c. Those donations don't have the same tax. And they also have, there's issues with solicitation licenses and things like that.
Yeah.
That a non 501c3 easily could get caught in.
Yeah. That was it. Everything else was great. Thank you. And thank you for listening to us, Jack. I'm sure you were hearing our voices in your sleep. Sounds terrifying.
Thank you.
I don't have any objection. I think some get too much, but that's beside the point. And I agree with Kathleen. It's bad to see somebody lying on a bench at night covered up. It's very, very bad. And I have the incident of one who would try to sleep all day and put food, and the getting the food got me. I couldn't deal with that anymore. Just kidding. But that sleeping on the bench where they're waiting for the bus really hurts when it's that cold, when it's so cold. And I don't know what we can do about that.
Yeah.
But I thought you did a lot of work and I appreciate it.
Other things that came to mind? All right, so just looping back on the 501c3 conversation, just want to make sure that I have that in my head correctly. So the idea would be to, instead of striking that out, that bullet point, keep it in, but rephrase it to submit an IRS tax exempt letter or other documentation confirming 501c3 nonprofit status or that of
A fiscal spot or a fiscal sponsor with 501c3
Yeah, active
status.
501c3.
Active, yeah.
And another phrase that you might hear is fiscal intermediary.
Fiscal sponsor is the right word. Because, and that's important because that also means they're legally responsible for the funds that are received.
That makes sense.
Kathleen, you mentioned the solicitation license. Is
Yeah.
that an addition?
So if you're
Should be
gonna-
asking for or not?
No, we don't need to ask that, but when we're asking for leverage, because we're asking about leverage, to leverage that, they're gonna have to either be getting donations or grants or something. to get donations, you're gonna have to have that solicitation letter. That's not for us, that's for, that's not in,
You're talking about matching funds.
No,
well, not matching funds, but how are you gonna leverage, how are you gonna take our, that money, how are you gonna leverage it? Is it just for the event, or is it going to be, are you getting matches, are you, that's one of those things I wanna know about.
Is that in the form?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's already,
It is in the form
it's
of,
not a requirement of, we're not requiring, and I'm not suggesting that we require, one-to-one matches. But I don't want us to be the sole funder or, something like that where there's been no,
and I think what Commissioner Ferguson's getting at is with a CSL that they've been authorized by the state to solicit for contributions. And therefore they're actively doing it either because they're soliciting grant makers. A lot of grant makers ask for the CSL. I know this, the county does as part of the application for their grant application, and then to solicit individual donors too. So I think what Commissioner Ferguson point is just making sure that if you have that 501(c)(3) status, you have a CSL, should have a
you should,
CSL,
like,
and that therefore you're going through the process.
and I guess that was my question, is asking, should we be asking for the solicitation license on top of the 501?
Well, it is just a certificate.
Yeah.
And anyone can go look up an organization
Yeah.
certificate. So even if they don't have the copy of it, they can go online and get it.
Yeah, it's
pretty
easy to
easily,
get, I
so-
guess,
So I don't know.
it does need to be renewed
Every
every
year.
year, so.
I
So
mean,
I wouldn't be opposed to just putting in another sheet of paper just to say that it's taken care of, but I know that if we're eventually talking about one day possibly going in with the county, that is a requirement that the county has. So it wouldn't be bad to go ahead and ask for it.
I mean, I'm neutral on whether or not we ask, but I'm thinking ahead because we are asking for leverage and I think it's appropriate to. And I don't want us to be setting up groups that may not, they may be naive, but may be brand new, and I wouldn't want to be setting them up to get themselves in a bind.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
So what was
Exactly.
the consensus of the board to ask for the CSL as well?
I would be favorable to,
simple
add-
document.
yeah, to add it.
So let me be the devil's advocate real quick. So we're not saying you have to be are we saying you have to be a 501(c)(3)?
Or the support of an.
Or support of it? Okay, so let me go back to the Hillsborough Climate Council. They're not a 501(c)(3). But they could get the support of, if they wanted to ask for funding again, they could get the support of a fiscal sponsor. And that fiscal sponsor would have to have a solicitor's license. So we're saying.
They're saying the fiscal sponsor would be a 501(c).
And that they would also have to have the solicitor's license.
Well, if their sources of funding are are donors and some grants, then the state requires that. If their sources of funding are, I guess it'd be multiple government entities, for example, you would, that's, CSL is not required. But if their sources of funding are, and that is if they're donors to get the tax write-off. You can solicit donors without the CSL. I think this is where you know better than I think you can still solicit donors without the CSL, but there is no tax advantage.
I think Bob has a comment on this process.
Isn't this more of an issue for the donee entity.
Exactly, it
So-
is.
So why do we care about it?
Well, and all I'm saying is.
I mean,
so
we're
that
just adding a level of complication that may make it more difficult for some entities to apply successfully. And we don't need the CSL.
We don't,
So I'm just,
yeah, no, it's a level of. One, don't wanna set up groups to get themselves in trouble, but also in terms of, we're getting so many requests. We're getting more requests than we can fund. I would like to see, where we're getting requests from folks who are the most vulnerable and have there's some stability. What I get uncomfortable with is I'm an ad hoc group and we've done it in the past in cases, but it's like, I want to do this. This is really cool. It is really cool. I don't have money. Let's go to the town for money as opposed to other sources, because we already know that the demand is so high for service providers of the basic needs, as well as the activities and things that bring vibrancy to the community, part of the basic fabric of life. So while I wanted to make a process to be easy for folks, not putting them through the ringer, because we're not talking about huge amounts of money, at the same time, I'm trying to have some artificial guardrails, if you will, and some decision points, because we already are going to be faced with hard choices of more asks than we can deliver.
Yeah, I think that's clear. We just made that one very long.
And muddle the,
Yeah, I was just thinking, we have our virtual kickoff where we'll have to explain this, and I don't know that I will be able to clearly articulate what is.
point is,
CSL.
I really want it to be as user-friendly and as simple as possible. And so the more sort of hurdles and things that we put in the way for organizations to have to accomplish it, belittle that purpose. So that was fine.
So are we ready for the next question? To go around the table?
Yes, and I think some of the
Did you-
commissioners
Yeah, I
already
did them all.
covered all of them. I don't know if others
Okay,
wanted
so-
to.
So you've got. your-
Yeah, I was good with phase 1 and 2 and 3. I thought the timelines looked great.
Rob, you okay with phase one?
Yes, definitely okay with phase 1. So we're still trying to do this for this fiscal year?
Yes, so
Okay.
that was, I think originally we were hoping to kind of get everything covered for the next cycle, but I know that there's been a lot of nonprofits who have been interested, and so we wanted to get a head start on trying to tackle as many as we could for this fiscal year. So that phase 1 would be for this cycle, so that we can get an application out, and then phase 2 and 3 would be for the next application cycle.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
we're calling this the light version.
There
That's
Yeah.
right.
I'm fine with phase one. What's the target date to have this revised and made available to the public?
For this coming one. As after this meeting, get any updates kind of finished out and get it sent out, early February.
Okay.
I've already said that I was cool with the other phases. Thank you.
Yeah, phase 1 looks good, phase 2 and 3 look good as well.
What was the question?
If we're okay with the phases.
I would have said so.
Perfect. I think, for tonight, it would just be great if you all could adopt the policy, with the tweaks that you all propose, so that we could, get that as part of that application policy that goes out to.
I mean, I'm glad to make the motion to adopt the tweaks, including the tweaks we've given you in this round of discussion.
I'll
The-
second,
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Jen.
And I guess sorry to go back. What was discussed, we discussed the 501c3, but I didn't hear consensus on the secondary. Do we ask them for the CSL? Is I didn't get that clear,
I
Did
kind of
not
thought
hear
it just,
consensus.
consensus.
I just thought it kind of died.
Okay,
Yeah, oh, they died.
okay, just wanted to confirm. Perfect. And then going back to the application, I know Commissioner Ferguson mentioned the question about the,
Vulnerable, and I, you know,
vulnerable.
I trust you to, because I know my clunkiness is not what we would want.
yeah, so we can definitely wordsmith it, but wanted to check in with the board if that was something that others were wanting to see in it. Just wanted to get,
Can I ask a process question, Kathleen?
Yeah.
Are you looking for a checkbox or are you looking for this to be in the narrative? Like we prioritize the support and funding of programs that support our most vulnerable populations? Are you looking for like a checkbox? Or fill in the blank?
I'm actually open because whatever we try and see what we get, we can tweak moving forward as need be. So how it shows up, I'm not married to. Because I honestly, I don't know what the best way is. And, you know, we can adjust.
And do we define vulnerable populations in our comprehensive sustainability plan, strategic plan?
not in the strategic plan. Do you know if on the comprehensive?
Don't know off the top of my head.
So it'd be a potentially vague term. If we were to ask which vulnerable population, you know,
But
but then we have to say, pick, or here's what we mean by vulnerable population.
well, and there are some federal definitions that we can refer to. I mean, you know, HHS or HUD, I still call it HHS, you know, HUD's got, definitions, we've got, like some EOC. I mean, there's some federal that we can,
What are other thoughts,
And-
how to approach Kathleen's suggestion?
So I agree with you. But the biggest criteria for me is that they're Hillsborough residents,
yeah,
or it's an organization that provides the majority of their services in Hillsborough.
oh, yeah.
Um,
I'm viewing that as, that's a given, and we already have those questions in there. But again, I'm just thinking, and I'm going back to OCIM, and, you know, we've given money to organizations that have different avenues. When we turned away organizations, they had just, the most vulnerable had to stop actual helping those populations. That bothers me.
So perhaps what you're asking then is for them to self-identify these vulnerable populations.
And I'm okay with
And that comes into the evaluation process. It's not a checkbox or a gatekeeping thing that is this organization's application even gonna make it
Mhm.
to round two.
I mean, I'm okay to again, I'm not married to how because I don't know the best way myself. And I think it's gonna be a little bit of tweaking. We make an attempt. We see the feedback. I had originally envisioned like one of the questions where they self-identify, it's a narrative. But you know, I'm not married to that if staff or the group, we have a consensus of something that's more effective.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on how to articulate that? Is it necessary? Is it,
No, I don't really have any thoughts.
Evelyn, do you have any thoughts on, should we ask that
Yes, but.
for the application for these funds? Are you serving a vulnerable population or need such as homelessness or hunger or
The
domestic
people sleeping
violence
on the
or,
bench.
I'm sorry,
The people sleeping on the bench. The people that she said who have no place to sleep, and I don't know, that is a lot of money. I mean, I don't know how you do that. You know, I don't know. You're a lawyer, is there any way of doing that?
but Evelyn, I think the question is, should we ask the applicants
Oh,
to
the applicants,
self-identify.
never mind, I thought you meant something, some applicants, yes, like the borough school, for instance.
So when you get a pack of applications, do you want to be able to look through them and see which ones are serving vulnerable populations?
Oh, vulnerable, well, they aren't serving vulnerable populations, rural schools not. I missed the point,
Okay,
I don't know how you would tell, I don't know how you would necessarily tell.
we would ask them.
Oh, okay, so you just we just wouldn't look at the applications and, okay, never mind.
Can I ask a question, real quick? Is that something that you think would come out under one of the requirements is attached program or service description, something that would naturally come out of that request?
I don't think so. At least that was my read when I went through, I was going through how will I, and I'm just speaking for me, how would I know? I don't know if I would.
Is there a way that we worded that is like human service something as opposed to,
Maybe
I
that.
mean, vulnerable populations is that's a tough.
Like I said, I'm not married, we know what we're asking and I'm not married to any particular.
Can I modify your
Mhm.
question to say, should we ask this type of question so that we have on our evaluation sheets to even know if this is a category that this application is seeking or not? Bob, is it?
I was gonna suggest that the question might be, what gap in community services is your organization proposing to fill? Because, like Commissioner Lloyd said, the Burwell School, they're not a vulnerable population. That doesn't mean that they're not worthy of some kind of contribution by the town. You know, maybe other organizations that are like that. But I think it's a question of what need in the community are you proposing to fill if these funds are awarded?
I like that.
Well, and that's why I said I didn't have any thoughts at first, because I was kind of ruminating on it. And was kind of going mentally in the same direction that Jen was. But I like Bob's wordsmithing over there, in part because vulnerable is such a subjective term, and while there might be organizations and professions where it has a definition, it could vary. Homeless folks would obviously be a vulnerable population, but you know, if we had an organization that wanted to do, I'll use it as an example, if we had someone who wanted to come to us because there was some sort of LGBTQ need in the community, is that considered a vulnerable population? Well, depending on what the services are, depending on even who within that community is being served, absolutely. You know, Black trans women are more likely to be assaulted, raped, and murdered than non-trans LGBTQ people. And so, especially if they're identifying as female, they're more likely to be, you know, vulnerable in a lot of different ways, but it may not be as a homeless person, or it may not be as.
That is actually a vulnerable population.
And so, you know, I think if we just have, you know, what are the gaps, that kind of leads us in a particular direction, and probably a more insightful direction, because we could have 10 applications for an issue where maybe they admit, yeah, it serves a vulnerable population, but maybe there actually isn't a gap that's being served. It's a passion project or something. So that's kind of the way I was beginning to think about it, because that's very similar to what in my day job we ask folks, or what are your gaps? Common question we ask, what are your gaps? What are your gaps? What are your gaps? Because we want to fill the gap
Mhm.
specifically, not just plug a hole in a budget or something, but what can we actually contribute? So I like that.
And Matt, to put a fine point on it, the county provides social services. And where the municipalities have the ability to fill the gaps, not provide their services outright.
Yeah.
But it's the county.
Agreed.
Okay, Megan, Rob, y'all okay with directionally with what Bob is suggesting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm good with it.
yeah.
Okay. Do you have what you need on that, and can?
I think so. Are you all seeing that as part of like section, like a
I think-
block under section 1 or
Section when
Be
the
under
policy
section
statement,
1.
what section?
of the
Yeah.
application?
Oh. Yeah, I almost think it could even be narrated there in the policy statement, or
Yeah, I do like it in section 1.
Okay.
But even if, I mean, I know that counties, but the fact is, in the next 4 years, it's good, the pressure's gonna be on us.
well, Jen's gotta get this done tonight, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean,
And I still want
Yes,
us
Megan.
to.
one more thing on the attached program or service description and the attached copy of proposed program budget. Since there's no, prior kickoff or anything, I feel like we kind of just leave these organizations up to a whole smorgasbord of formats and guidelines on how to present that to us. And if we have a lot of different applications, maybe we can at least just give them some guidelines on how we want to see that. It's just, and I was thinking about when I read those two. Be it,
I would want to try to get them into a single budget format because there's so.
this is the narrative
the
portion.
narrative portion.
Yeah, it's like, are we gonna get, a couple pages from some organizations? Are we gonna get like 500 words from some? Are they gonna send presentations? Or we've given them, they have the 3 minutes that they can talk to us and tell us about their programs, but I'm just wondering how all these narratives are gonna come to us, is my question.
I'm actually okay. I want to see how they present. And I'm okay. It's because it's gonna, depending on what they say, you can have 500 words that are impactful in a presentation that's gibberish.
Yeah.
Phase 3.
I guess in this point, it's just when I've done applications, if I have someplace to start, it makes it easier for the person actually doing instead of having to come up with the wide range of ways that you can present a project. It just helps to focus in to get that done easier. Not have it.
More consistent presentations too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beneficial on both sides. We're gonna see something similar.
It can cause them a lot extra work because they have their ways of presenting and we're having.
Yeah, we
Do
can,
you, how do you want to respond to that? Do you have something refined to put out next week? Or do you need more time to think about that and see what we get? And then,
And I'm asking for loose guidelines. It's not something specific. It's just we're looking for a narrative here of a couple paragraphs. Like right here, it's just too open-ended for me.
I would agree. For your sake, Jen, half page max.
okay. Yeah, we can certainly give them those guidelines. And then, like you said, we're all trying this out, and then there'll be that second in the phase 3, the evaluation, so we can come back and see what did we get, how can we make this easier for everyone, and did we get like, a million pages and we need to really come up with something more concrete. But we can give them something to work with from a target.
And take a step further. To reiterate what I think I said, and you listened to us multiple times, I'm pretty sure I said this, so, correct me if I'm wrong. But when we did this for the tourism board, every year for several years was a slight change because something didn't work, or, I think you were coming off the tourism board as we were starting to do this. But if certain things don't work, or we find out something was overkill, or oh my gosh, actually there was something we should have been asking for and we didn't get it last time, and we need to get it this time.
Mhm.
I think it's 100% fine that we continue to tweak. It may take us a few years to do it, because it's something we're only doing once a year.
Right.
It's not like when we run into the ordinances or UDO, but I would suggest thinking about ease is there are ways. Let me say this. One of the improvements we made with the tourism board was moving to a platform called Submittable. And it checks the application for completeness and other things. And then if we wanted a scoring mechanism amongst us as board members, that platform has it. And then if you're not using, you're not as a digital native like I might be, that there are ways to also generate that in hard copy form as well. But it makes it really easy. Things don't get lost in email, and it does anything that's a required file in order to submit, you have to attach it and that sort of thing. So I would suggest maybe also talking with Shannon about her experiences with Submittable.
Okay.
And I know from an evaluator perspective, and then also the feedback we got from folks was they seem to like the digital submission type thing a lot better than, downloading a Word or PDF file and then filling it out and losing an attachment or something like that. So it was very helpful. It saved a lot of time.
Even just
Good
emailing
suggestion.
it in, it can be difficult
Yeah.
when it's all sewn up against, limits on your emails.
Oh, yeah.
Good
definitely.
suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think
will
we should
follow.
probably move on. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Okay, committee updates and reports. Evelyn, do you have any updates? Matt?
Yeah, just a few updates. Let me just say, I love those conversations that we have in Hillsborough, because our colleagues in other jurisdictions don't get to get into the nitty gritty of things, but I think the fact that we can is really great, and we can offer feedback before something goes out instead of afterwards. And it's like, hey, staff, why didn't you ask this question? It's like, we didn't know you wanted that. So I appreciate y'all always involving us in the nitty gritty. Biggest one is, or biggest two things that I have are Visitors Bureau. So we met last week. And it was my first time at the High School Athletic Association. They were our host. And we received updates, mostly looking at hotel revenue and how hotels have bounced back after COVID. Shocker, they really haven't. The tax rates kind of mask that, because, hotels are charging more for hotel rooms than they were. But the occupancy isn't there, even though there is a desire countywide to bring in new hotel space. We did talk about how marketable Orange County as a whole is for things like conferences and whatnot, and really the structural issues in that being that we don't have a conference center. A lot of the hotel rooms that we do have are away from where events would be, and the need for shuttles and that sort of thing. So we really talked through some really good stuff on that. The other thing is that the Visitors Bureau may go through some rebranding. So I'd be interested to hear from Mayor Bell and Shannon what those discussions were like I'm sure what was brought up last week is pretty similar to some of the conversations that y'all had when you were on the board, Mayor Bell. But of course, there are folks who think Chapel Hill dominates too much and whatnot. So they have a contract with a design firm that just did some perspective. What could a logo look like? Because it would have to go out to bid. So there's that possibly on the horizon. So I definitely want to get compare notes, Mayor Bell, since you've gone through that. And it seems to be a much more contentious issue than I thought a logo could be. And then the other big one is that I did get the goals submitted that we agreed to the league. So, that was received and I got the confirmation of that. Thought about sending it to y'all to say, hey, I followed through and I didn't select my choice of legislative priorities, but everyone's choice of legislative priorities. That's my report.
Thank you, Matt. Kathleen?
Okay, so I've got a bit.
And I know you went to COG, last week, and
Yep.
so I skipped that one.
So, yeah, I'll just start off with COG. So, yes, last week at COG, we received legislative goals of county commissioners. The COG goals we've shared with everyone. I do have a copy for if anyone is interested. I've got a copy of the whole county commissioner legislative, their top 5, then all 41 or 42 goals of their advocacy. And then we will be receiving the leagues probably Friday, but we've got the early view of what the leagues will be. And then I can also share if anyone's interested on the COG, the state COG, what our legislative goals are. The only difference between this year and last year is we have removed the ARMS system, which is the platform that allows like Meals for Wheels to be paid for. It's 90 software that is held together with Scotch tape and string, and it's horrible, but DHHS has not put it on their budget. So until they have it on their budget, we're not doing that. We also now are up to 49 member governments. Foxfire has joined. Which
One
is,
way.
we're 2 away.
2 way. Yeah.
Taylortown and one other, and I always forget it. Today was the branding of the MPO, so it's now Triangle West Transportation Planning Organization. So that was kind of cool. I don't know if y'all get National League of Cities. Are y'all getting that? So I didn't know, Eric, particularly they had, I don't know if it's annual or semi-annual, the infrastructure hub grant writing boot camps. They've got another one that's going on. We'll see another one a little bit later in this year. Also, let me pull up my note. Local bills. We never ask for local bills. I think we should, but the deadline of those local bills, Senate is February 13th and February 20th for the House. But if we want to ask to our member delegation for local bills, and I'm seeing where, I mean, when Rural Hall can get $500,000, I mean, granted it is Dustin Hall's district, but they're asking for money. Why not us? For our projects, the worst they could do is say no. Well, we don't have it already. Also, the Orange County Rape Crisis Center Gala is coming February the 27th, seeking sponsors. There's tickets are already on sale. And this is coming in. This is a completely separate, if we get enough money, there'll be matching funds. But it's supporting the Slipkin House, which is the house on 70, to get that up and running because they will be in Hillsborough. For those who may not be aware, they lost about 70% of their funding. So they have been in dire straits and the need is going up, not down. I forgot on the league side, the City Vision, those register. If you're going, register now. The hotel is probably already booked up. I have found that if you don't book within like hours of the registration, you will end up elsewhere and it's a whole lot more expensive. But it should be good. And I was going to ask Eric, they're still having the recruiting on police departments. Are you going to be on that panel again?
It's the same exact panel So I was, so yes, I'm gonna be on it, which is great because then I didn't have to do any preparation. So I know you and Commissioner Hughes went last time. You can go to, I was actually looking at, there was like 4 concurrent sessions. I go, these are better than the ones I was at, so you can go to the better one.
No, you did a great job. No, and you repped Hillsborough really well. You brought up the points that it just made us so proud.
Well, thank you. They said there was well received and they wanted to do it and have a rinse and repeat, so
Cool.
thank you.
The other thing is, I mentioned City Vision, the town and state dinner, town state dinner is February. I cannot read my own writing, whatever that is. And then the last piece would be, at our February meeting, I will be, gone for that meeting. I will be at the National Association of Regional Councils.
Just a regular meeting, in other words.
The regular meeting. Yeah, and so I will be, assuming board position, representing North Carolina and South Carolina regional councils. And if I ever figure out what my writing says for there, I'll let you guys know. Oh, I know what it is. Housing committee. And then I promise it's the last thing. The housing committee for the COG, we have met. We are the first committee to meet and get started. Our goal, it's not solidified, but the general is to come up with a regional housing. At least regional housing that feeds into the comprehensive regional plan that our jurisdiction has fed into. The timing couldn't tell you for that, but that's the end goal for us to do. We've identified some down and dirty ways to at least, we think will work to give a snapshot of what the region's current housing maps and plans look like. So what that would look like if you took everybody's and stitched it together. We think, she says, I met with talking with staff, we are cautiously optimistic we may be able to pull that off. With that said, a lot the devil's in the details as we get into it, but we think there's a way we can do that, knock on wood. But it's really the first regional housing committee, true region, and we've got developers, we've got the nonprofit providers for housing, ownership, rental, repairs, real estate, and electeds, just for starters off. And I'm sure we will grow from there. And with that, I'm done.
Good, thank you, Kathleen. So I attended the January 15th Chamber of Commerce meeting, had elections. Rodney Clapp of Fidelity Bank is the new chair. I represented Hillsborough at the Martin Luther King Committee celebration. On the 19th, I gave greetings to the gathering at Mount Bright Baptist Church. I was joined by Congresswoman Valerie Fushi to my right, and Superior Court Judge Shamika Reinhart, who's the guest speaker on my left. And it was a great presentation there. And after that, I did have a chance to speak to Representative Price about legislative goals. And in the past, we've talked about it in our meetings, and we invited Representative Price and Senator Myers to come to us. And the feeling is that we don't need to go through that much of a process, but they would welcome an updated list of our legislative priorities, and sooner rather than later. So we can talk about adding that to the agenda or just handling it by email. Then have MPO tomorrow morning, and then the joint former DCHC MPO and Campo, the capital area MPO, is on Wednesday. So that's it.
I have no reports. We were supposed to have a Parks and Recreation meeting, but it got snowed out.
Right,
I attended the UNRBA board meeting 2 weeks ago, 2 Wednesdays ago. And it was kind of our introductory meeting as we welcome new members from the last election. Also this weekend, I attended the Orange County Forum on Low Barrier Housing Needs. And I'm not sure if Matt, you heard one of the panelists mentioned Quorum Homes. And it was one of the developers that I was interested in what they're doing when we talked in our housing workshops. I emailed you that a while back, so. But that is where I was lately.
Great. Derek, do you have anything? Okay, any other business before the board before we adjourn? Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Bye.
Any opposed? Thank you, have a good night.
Thank you.